This is Dr. Atta from DestroySocialAnxiety.com, and I wanted to talk briefly about the causes, or our understanding of the causes of social anxiety. So obviously there is no straight answer to that question. Everybody in the psychiatric community and psychological community has different opinions, and the debate is ongoing. So I'm going to present just the general principles and obviously my opinion at the very end. So depending on which school of thought you ask, the general idea is social anxiety is either a congenital issue, which is something you are born with and it's a chemical imbalance. For example, we can understand it as deficiency in some of the neurotransmitters such as serotonin, possibly deficiency of GABA neurotransmitter, or excessive secretion of glutamate. But the general concept in biological psychiatry is that you are born with it, and there is not much you can do through therapy or through the behavior that can change that. Therefore, the solution to the problem is pharmacological treatment. And if we talk about the treatment for social anxiety, it generally consists of means or medications that increase either the level of serotonin, and that's where the popular antidepressants such as SSRIs are the most important right now, the most popular right now due to their safety profile, or benzodiazepines, which directly work on GABA A receptor. And the fact is that depending on what kind of specific anxiety disorder you have, those medications have been effective. Although every medication has its side effects. For example, with the majority of antidepressants that work on serotonin level, the major side effect is decrease in sexual drive and worsening sexual performance. Whereas with benzodiazepines, the biggest problem is tolerance and possible withdrawal and dependence on the medication, and with continued use, decreased effect of the medication. As we know, things like Xanax and Valium and Ativan and Klonopin are all examples of benzodiazepines, and with continuous use their effect decreases typically, and you need to take more and more of it, and essentially you become completely dependent on those medications. So and that could create a problem, especially when you attempt to stop those medications. It could be fairly dangerous. But the first theory creates the concept that you're born with it, not much can be done, this is who you are, and the only way to deal with it is through manipulating the neurotransmitter. It's kind of the model of a diabetes. So you basically develop diabetes type 1, which was you are born with it. There's nothing you can do except taking insulin. The alternative theory, psychodynamic theory, focuses on the events that happen in your childhood. The idea is that each of us has a kind of similar makeup when we are born. However, the differentiating factor is what happens to us when we are children and maybe young adolescents, but mostly children, and that there are traumatic events in our childhood that determine the level of response to it. And if you have a very traumatic event that causes you to be anxious in your childhood, it tends to go through the rest of your life, in which you are anxious and you're seeing your world through the anxious perspective. And the psychodynamic theorists suggest that the solution to this is understanding the origin or cause of that trauma that you experienced, and once you can understand the trauma, you can get it from the subconscious level to a conscious level, and that allows you to accept this, and the idea is you feel better. Okay, And then there is a third option, which is cognitive behavior therapy concept, which basically focuses on the idea that we don't know why somebody's anxious. However, we can solve the problem, and that is the idea is that you are focusing on the thoughts that you have associated with the anxiety. You try to identify them. Ideally, you try to deflect them and try to drop them, and then you, in the behavior part, you try to change your behavior to reflect those changed thoughts. So that's the theory of cognitive behavior therapy. I'm obviously simplifying the topic very much, but I think for the purposes of this short video, that should be certainly sufficient. And then so these are theories. And then there is a evolutionary theory, which I personally am proponent of. And the way I see the origin of social anxiety, especially with men, although women have very similar kind of model, but with men it's much more clear to me why it happens. So that's why I want to use the example of men here, is that all men specifically are programmed in a certain way, in an ancient way, that goes back to the original biological setup, which was in a herd. Our current civilization is maybe 7,000 years old, probably less than that if we really consider modern tools of civilization, such as democracy, such as money, such as political tools, and the idea of power through economical means. It could be several thousand years, whereas our biological history is much longer. Therefore, we have certain imprint that stays with us, even though it's not really useful nowadays. So the way I understand it is that each of us men has imprint that tells us how to behave in a herd, and essentially every instinct that we have is based on that principle. So, for example, if, again, something I was talking about, if I am to go and try to speak publicly in front of the group of people, I am tremendously anxious, and the question is why. There is really no objective reason to be afraid of speaking in front of, let's say, 200 people. Except obviously when you're trying to sell a big product, and depending on the outcome of the speech, your life depends on it. But most of the situations when we are anxious, that's not the case. What happens is we have some silly presentation in front of a group of people, and we are dying of anxiety. If we make the worst speech in the world, nothing is going to happen. You will not be fired, you will not make less money, nothing is going to happen to you. And the question is, why do we feel so anxious? And in my view, the reason is that it's an imprinted reaction to the psychology of being in a herd. Because in a herd, which consists of several hundred people, or if it's a bigger herd, even more, what you say and how you will be accepted by the herd determines your life. Let's say you say something in front of the big group people that it's not accepted. It's something that the 200 people will not like. Your herd will not accept. Will say, what you're saying is rubbish. It's no good. In the old days, if that happened, you would be excluded from the herd, and that would cause you to get out of the herd and die. Okay? So you producing a bad speech is equivalent to dying. And that's how we feel. That's how we feel when we're supposed to make a public speech. We feel as if we are facing a death situation. And in my view, the reason for that is because we are biologically based. That's the evolutionary concept of the social anxiety. Like I said, I think it works. In my personal opinion, this has to be ideally mixed with some kind of a traumatic event in your childhood as well, or in your young adolescence. So in other words, not only you have to be set up in this way, but something bad must have happened to you to confirm that speaking in publicly is a no-no, or being embarrassed in a group of people is no-no. So something must have happened, and it's obviously very easy to happen because our society frowns upon examples of embarrassment, right? So there is that confirmation that at some point has to happen. That's my belief. Another reason why I believe that theory is that there is a group of people who don't have the social anxiety. They don't have the fear of approaching women or standing in front of the group of people, for example, or are not afraid to embarrass themselves, or they are not afraid to approach and say things that are completely not true and not worry about it. And that group is classified as psychopaths. Those are people who are kind of devoid of some part of the theory is that they are devoid of part of the brain, and they are not able to appreciate that embarrassment, that social structure. So in their view, doesn't matter what I say, there is no problem anyway. And in the old days, those individuals were eliminated most likely because their behavior was not acceptable anyway. They would do things like steal, females and steal goods and do not respect the order of the herd, and they usually were excluded. In today's society, that's not the case. Some small percentage of them ends up in jail if they commit tremendous crimes, but most of them are smart enough or able to function to the point where there is no risk. And the point of it all is that observing those people is very educational from the point of view of the evolutionary biology, because they don't have those this software programmed in them. So for them to break the rules is very easy, and they are the minority. They are the people who kind of give us an example of what would happen if we didn't have that software in our heads, if we were not programmed to be afraid of the social reactions. It's a fascinating topic in itself. I could talk about sociopaths or psychopaths for hours, but this is just to introduce the concept of psychopaths and their value to the understanding of social anxiety. Thank you for that my little speech. And next video, I would like to talk a little bit about treatment options. Thank you.